My name's Josh. I'm 25 fresh out of the University of Washington with an architecture degree that's yet to prove its worth. Seattle's a tough city to start over in rainy, expensive, and indifferent to dreamers like me. I'd been crashing in the dorms for a few weeks after graduation, living off instant noodles and freelance gigs sketching floor plans for local startups. The pay was decent, but not enough for the glossy downtown lofts my classmates were posting about on social media. I needed something cheap, quiet, a place to think, not just sleep. My budget was tight, and after days of scrolling through overpriced listings, I was starting to think I'd end up in a shared basement with three strangers and a mold problem. Then I saw a handwritten flyer taped to the window of a laundromat near my favorite coffee shop. The ink was smudged, but the words were clear: room for rent, second floor. Private. Utilities included. Quiet tenant wanted. Must respect privacy. Contact Marlene. No phone number, just an email address scrawled at the bottom. It felt old school, almost suspicious, but I was desperate. I jotted it down, sent a quick message from my phone, and didn't expect much. Most landlords in this city wanted credit checks and firstborn children as collateral. To my surprise, she replied within an hour. The email was short, formal. Come by tomorrow, 6 p.m. I don't promise anything. I choose my tenants carefully. The tone was firm, almost cold, and I pictured a gray-haired woman in a cardigan, probably with a cat, and a long list of house rules. I wrote back I'll be there and spent the rest of the day wondering if I'd just signed up for a lecture on keeping the thermostat low. The address was in a quiet suburb just outside Seattle where the streets were lined with old trees and houses that looked like they'd seen a few decades. It wasn't far from the city, but it felt like another world. No honking horns, no crowded sidewalks, just the soft patter of rain and the smell of wet earth. I pulled up in my beat-up Honda, the wipers squeaking, and checked the address again. The house was 2 stories wood-sided with a sagging front porch and a tangle of grapevines climbing one side. It wasn't fancy, but it was clean, the kind of place that felt lived in, not staged. A single light glowed from the front window, and I took a deep breath before knocking. The door opened, and there she was, Marlene. Not the stern grandma I'd imagined. She was 43 maybe, though she could have passed for younger if you didn't look too closely at the faint lines around her eyes. Her brown hair was pulled into a loose bun, strands escaping like they had a mind of their own. She wore a simple white button-up shirt, sleeves rolled to her elbows, and dark linen pants that moved with her like they were made for her. Her feet were bare, her toenails unpainted, and she stood with a quiet confidence like the house itself belonged to her in a way that went beyond ownership. Her eyes, a deep brown, sized me up, not unkindly, but with a sharpness that made me stand straighter. "You're Josh," she asked, her voice low, steady, with a hint of something warm underneath, like she was holding it back. I nodded, wiping my damp hands on my jeans. "Yeah, hear about the room." She stepped aside, gesturing me in. "Come see it. But don't get your hopes up. I'm picky." The inside of the house smelled faintly of cedar and rain, the floors creaking under my sneakers. It was tidy, but not sterile. Books stacked on a side table, a half-finished sketch on the coffee table, a mug of tea steaming on the counter. She led me up a narrow staircase to the second floor, her bare feet silent against the wood. The room was small but perfect, a single bed with a quilt, a desk by a wide window overlooking the backyard, and a shelf with a few dusty novels. The view was all green grapevines and a small garden wet from the rain. "It's quiet," she said, leaning against the doorframe, watching me take it in. "That's what I need it to stay. No parties, no loud music, no revolving door of guests. I live alone and I like it that way." I nodded, already picturing myself at that desk sketching late into the night. "Sounds like my kind of place," I said. "I'm not big on noise either." She tilted her head, her eyes lingering on me a moment longer than felt casual. "We'll see," she said. "It's $800 a month, utilities included. But if you're serious about staying, we can negotiate." The way she said it wasn't flirty, not exactly, but there was something in her pause, in the way her gaze held mine, that made my pulse kick up. I swallowed, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm serious," I said. "I think I'm exactly who you're looking for." She didn't smile, but the corner of her mouth twitched like she was testing me, and I'd passed the first round. "1-month trial," she said. "Move in tomorrow. We'll talk about the rest later." I nodded, my stomach twisting with something I couldn't name, relief maybe, or the start of something else. As I left the rain picking up outside, I glanced back and saw her standing in the doorway, her silhouette framed by the porch light watching me go. I moved in the next day, my Honda packed with a duffel bag, a laptop, and a box of books and sketch pads. The rain had let up, leaving the air heavy with the smell of wet leaves and earth. Marlene's house looked just as it had the night before, quiet, unassuming with the grapevines dripping from the morning's drizzle. I hauled my stuff up the narrow staircase to the second-floor room, the wood creaking under my sneakers. The space felt even better in daylight. The window let in a soft gray light, and the garden below was a tangle of green like something out of a painting. I set my laptop on the desk, hung a few shirts in the closet, and tried to shake the feeling that I was stepping into someone else's story. Marlene was downstairs when I finished unpacking, standing in the kitchen, pouring coffee into a chipped blue mug. She was dressed simply again, white button-up dark jeans, barefoot. As usual, her hair tied back in that loose bun. "Settled?" she asked, not looking up from the coffee pot. Her voice had that same calm, steady edge, like she was always one step ahead of the conversation. "Yeah," I said, leaning against the counter, feeling a little out of place. "Thanks for this. It's exactly what I needed." She glanced at me, her brown eyes sharp but not unkind. "Don't thank me yet," she said. "Let's see if you can handle the quiet." The first week went by in a blur of routine. I'd wake up early, work on freelance designs at my desk, the soft patter of rain against the window keeping me company. Marlene was a ghost in her own house there, but not intrusive. I'd catch glimpses of her mornings watering the garden in a faded sweater, her hands quick and sure around the plants. Evenings sitting on the porch with a book, jazz drifting from a small speaker. The music was soft, mournful, like it was carrying something heavier than the notes. I kept to her rules: no noise, no mess, no guests. It wasn't hard. I wasn't here to throw parties. I was here to figure out what came next. Our interactions were brief, careful. A nod in the hallway, a good morning. As I grabbed coffee, a quick wave when I passed her on the porch. But every time I noticed her a little more, the way her fingers curled around her mug, the faint lines at the corners of her eyes when she smiled, the way she moved like she belonged to the house, like it was an extension of her. There was a quiet beauty to her, not loud or showy, but undeniable, like a painting you don't notice until you're standing right in front of it. I told myself I was just observing, that it was normal to notice someone you lived with. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. One evening, about a week in, I saw her on the porch, her silhouette soft against the glow of a single lamp. She was reading, her legs tucked under her, a glass of red wine on the table beside her. The jazz was playing again, something slow and aching, and the air smelled of rain and grapevines. I hesitated, then stepped outside, my sketch pad under my arm. "Mind if I join you?" I asked, my voice quieter than I meant. She looked up, her eyes catching the light, and for a moment, she just studied me. "Sure," she said, finally nodding to the chair across from her, "but don't expect me to entertain you." I sat, opening my sketch pad, pretending to work on a floor plan for a client. But my eyes kept drifting to her, the way her fingers traced the edge of her book, the way her lips moved slightly as she read, like she was whispering the words to herself. "What are you reading?" I asked, mostly to break the silence. She held up the book, a worn copy of some poetry collection, the cover too faded to read. "Neruda," she said. "He's better in Spanish, but I make do." Her voice had a warmth to it, like she was sharing something small but personal. "You speak Spanish?" I asked, surprised. She nodded, setting the book down. "Enough to get by. I learned when I was painting, traveling for work. South America mostly." Her tone was casual, but there was a weight to it, like she was brushing against a memory she didn't want to linger on. I wanted to ask more about the painting, the traveling her, but something in her posture told me to stop. Instead, I said, "I sketch houses, not poems, but I get wanting to make something that lasts." She looked at me, then really looked, her eyes narrowing slightly, like she was seeing me for the first time. "That's a start," she said, her voice soft but deliberate. "Most people don't even try." We sat there for a while, the jazz filling the space between us, the rain a steady hum in the background. It wasn't much, just a moment, a conversation, but it felt like the first crack in the wall between us. When I went back to my room that night, the house didn't feel as quiet anymore. It felt alive, like it was waiting for something to happen. The house settled into a rhythm over the next couple of weeks, its quiet creaks and the soft patter of Seattle rain becoming a kind of background music to my days. I'd wake to the smell of coffee drifting up from the kitchen, work on my freelance designs by the window overlooking Marlene's garden, and lose myself in sketches of houses I'd probably never build. Marlene was always there, but not in an overbearing way, just a presence like the house itself. I'd see her in flashes watering her plants at dawn, her silhouette sharp against the morning mist. Or, late at night, curled up on the porch with her jazz and her books, the glow of a lamp catching the loose strands of her hair. Each time I felt that pull, a mix of curiosity and something heavier, something I wasn't ready to name. Our interaction stayed small, careful, like we were both testing the edges of this strange new space we shared. A nod as I passed her in the hallway, a quick thanks when she left a plate of cookies on the counter with a note that said, "For the tenant." But every encounter left me noticing more the way her fingers brushed the leaves of her grapevines. The faint smile she gave when she thought I wasn't looking, the way her voice softened when she talked about her garden, like it was the only thing keeping her anchored. I told myself I was just settling in, getting used to the house, but deep down, I knew I was getting used to her. One night, about 3 weeks in, I couldn't sleep. A client had sent back a design with a laundry list of changes, and my head was pounding from staring at my laptop too long. I wandered downstairs to the kitchen, hoping a glass of water might clear the fog. The house was dark, save for a soft glow from the counter where Marlene sat, her hair loose for once, cascading over a baggy sweater that slipped off one shoulder. She was nursing a glass of red wine, a sketch pad open in front of her, though her pencil was still like she'd given up on whatever she was trying to draw. The air smelled faintly of the wine and something else, lavender maybe, or the rain-soaked wood of the house. "Rough night?" she asked without looking up, her voice low, almost swallowed by the quiet jazz playing from a speaker on the counter. I froze, caught off guard, then leaned against the doorway. "Yeah," I said, rubbing the back of my neck. "Deadlines?" She glanced at me, her brown eyes catching the dim light, and for a second I saw something raw, tiredness maybe, or something deeper. "Can't sleep," she said simply, taking a sip of her wine. "Too many thoughts." She paused, then added with a half smile, "Or maybe I'm just hungry for something that's not in the fridge." I laughed, the sound louder than I meant in the still house. "Same," I said, moving to the sink to fill a glass. "Deadlines make me forget to eat half the time." She tilted her head, watching me with that same sharp gaze she'd had the first day. "You're too young to be forgetting meals," she said, her tone teasing but gentle. "Sit. I'll pour you a glass." Before I could protest, she slid a second glass across the counter, filling it with wine. I hesitated, then sat, the stool creaking under me. We didn't talk much at first, just sipped the wine, the jazz weaving through the silence. Then she spoke, her voice quieter now, like she was pulling the words from somewhere deep. "I used to be a painter," she said, her fingers tracing the edge of her sketch pad. "Interiors, mostly. I'd spend hours mixing colors, getting the light just right. My ex-husband, thought it was a waste of time, said I should get a real job, something stable. So I stopped. Then he left anyway." She laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Funny how that works. I kept the house. The paint smells, the quiet. He got whatever he was chasing." I didn't know what to say. Her words felt like a window cracking open, letting me see a piece of her I hadn't expected. "That sucks," I said finally, my voice clumsy. "I mean, stopping something you loved because of him? You didn't deserve that." She looked at me, her eyes softening, and for a moment the air felt heavier, like we'd crossed some invisible line. "Maybe," she said, "but I'm still here. This house, these walls, they're mine. Even if they're lonely sometimes." I took a sip of wine, my throat tight. "I get that," I said. "I've been drawing houses since I was a kid, but I don't know. Sometimes it feels like I'm building things for other people, not myself. Like I'm scared to want anything too big." She leaned forward slightly, her elbow on the counter, her gaze steady. "You're young, Josh. You've got time to want big things. Don't let quiet swallow you up. It's a good place to think, but a bad place to hide." Her words hit harder than I expected, like she'd seen right through me. I nodded, unable to look away from her. The jazz played on soft and mournful, and the rain tapped against the windows, sealing us in this moment. I didn't know it then, but that night was the first time I felt the house wasn't just a place to live. It was a place where something was starting to grow. A month had passed since I moved into Marlene's house, and the quiet I'd craved at first had started to feel like a rhythm I could lean into. My days were predictable coding and sketching at my desk, the soft patter of Seattle rain against the window, the occasional creak of the old house settling. Marlene was always there, a presence woven into the woodwork, her footsteps silent, but her energy unmistakable. I'd catch her in the mornings, tending her garden with a focus that made the rest of the world disappear, or at night reading on the porch, the glow of her lamp cutting through the misty air. Each time I felt that pull growing stronger, a quiet ache I didn't dare name. One morning, as I was heading out for coffee, an email pinged on my phone. It was from Marlene, short and to the point. "We need to talk about the rent. Tonight, 8 p.m. porch." My stomach dropped. I'd been paying on time, keeping the place tidy, sticking to her rules. Had I done something wrong, missed a payment, made too much noise? The whole day my mind spun, replaying every interaction, wondering if I'd crossed some line I hadn't seen. By the time evening rolled around, I was a bundle of nerves, my sketchpad untouched, my coffee cold. At 8, I stepped onto the porch, the air damp and cool, the grapevines dripping from an earlier shower. Marlene was already there, sitting in her usual chair, a tray with a teapot and 2 mugs on the table beside her. She wore a loose sweater, her hair down for once, curling softly over her shoulders. The lamp cast a warm glow across her face, softening the lines around her eyes. She looked up as I approached, her expression calm, unreadable. "Sit," she said, pouring tea into a mug and sliding it toward me. I took the chair across from her, my hands wrapping around the warm ceramic, trying to steady myself. So I started, my voice tighter than I wanted. "The rent? Did I mess something up?" She shook her head, her lips curving into a faint smile like she'd expected my worry. "No, Josh. You're fine. Better than fine, actually. You're quieter than I thought you'd be." Her tone was light, but her eyes held mine steady, and searching like she was looking for something I hadn't said. I let out a breath, relief mixing with confusion. "Then what's this about?" I asked. She leaned back, her fingers tracing the rim of her mug. "I don't need the money," she said, her voice low, deliberate. "Not really. This house is paid off and my work covers what I need. But I do need something else." She paused, her gaze dropping to the table, then back to me. "Every night for 10 minutes, I want you to read to me. Doesn't matter what your design's, a book, something you wrote, even a grocery list. Just something real. Something that's you. If you do that, the rent's half. $400 a month." I stared at her, my mind scrambling to catch up. "Read to you." I said the words, sounding dumber out loud than they had in my head. Like, out loud? She nodded, her smile softening, but there was something vulnerable in her eyes. Something I hadn't seen before. "I used to love someone who read to me," she said, her voice quieter now, almost fragile. "Every night he'd read poetry stories, even his own terrible writing. It made this house feel alive. Then he left, and all I got were bills and silence. I don't need love, Josh. I don't need promises. I just want to hear someone's voice again, someone who's here, really here." Her words hung in the air, heavy with a kind of honesty that made my chest ache. I could see it now, the loneliness she'd buried under her calm exterior, the way this house was both her refuge and her cage. I swallowed, my throat tight. "Why me?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She looked at me, her eyes steady but soft, like she was seeing something I didn't. "Because you're not just passing through," she said. "I can tell. You're looking for something too, even if you don't know what it is." I didn't know what to say. The idea was strange, intimate in a way I hadn't expected, but it didn't feel wrong. It felt like a door opening, just a crack, to something I didn't fully understand. "Okay," I said, finally, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'll do it. 10 minutes a night." Her smile widened, not wide, but real, like a weight had lifted. "Good," she said, pouring more tea. "Start tomorrow. Pick something that matters to you." As I walked back to my room, the rain starting up again outside, I felt the house shift around me. It wasn't just a place to sleep anymore. It was a place where something was beginning. Something I wasn't sure I was ready for, but couldn't turn away from. The nightly readings became our ritual, a strange and quiet thread weaving through the days. Every evening at 9, I'd meet Marlene on the porch, the air heavy with the scent of rain-soaked grapevines, and the soft hum of her jazz playing low in the background. I'd bring something to read sometimes, a page from my sketchbook, describing a house I'd designed with open windows and warm light. Sometimes a poem I'd found online, awkward in my mouth but honest. Once even a journal entry I'd scribbled about feeling lost after college, the words raw and clumsy as I read them aloud. Marlene would sit across from me, her mug of tea steaming, her eyes half closed, listening without a word. She never commented, never judged, just nodded when I finished, her face unreadable but soft, like she was holding on to every syllable. At first it felt strange, like I was performing for an audience of one. But as the nights went on, it became something else, less about the words and more about the act of sharing them. I started to notice the way her shoulders relaxed when I read, the way her lips curved slightly when I stumbled over a line, the way her fingers traced the edge of her mug like she was drawing something in her mind. And I started to look forward to those 10 minutes, when the house felt alive, when it wasn't just me and my laptop against the world. I was starting to see Marlene, really see her, not just the woman who owned the house, but the one who'd painted rooms and lost love, who carried her loneliness like a shadow she'd learned to live with. One night, about 6 weeks in, I read something different. I'd been working on a design for a client, a small house with a wide porch, the kind I imagined someone could grow old in. But instead of reading the technical notes, I read a journal entry I'd written late the night before after a long day of revisions. "There's this woman," I started, my voice low, the words feeling heavier than I'd expected. "She lives behind a door I don't know how to open. Not because it's locked, but because I'm afraid of what's on the other side. I'm afraid of wanting something I can't keep." I stopped, my throat tight, realizing too late how close the words cut to the truth. I glanced at Marlene, expecting her to look away, but her eyes were fixed on me, wide and unguarded, the lamplight catching a faint sheen in them. She didn't say anything for a long moment, just sat there, her tea forgotten on the table. Then she stood, her sweater slipping off one shoulder, and walked inside without a word. My stomach sank. I'd gone too far, said too much. I closed my sketch pad, the air suddenly colder, and went back to my room, replaying the moment, wondering if I'd broken whatever fragile thing we'd been building. I barely slept that night, the rain tapping against my window like it was keeping count of my mistakes. The next morning, I found something outside my door, a folded piece of paper heavy with the texture of good sketch stock. I opened it, and there was Marlene's drawing, a room with a wide window, sunlight spilling across a wooden floor, a bed with a quilt, and a garden visible outside, green and wild. It was simple but alive, every line deliberate, like she'd poured herself into it. At the bottom, in her neat handwriting, were the words, "If you want to draw a different life, start with this." My chest tightened, not just from the drawing, but from what it meant. She'd heard me, really heard me, and this was her answer. That night, I went to the porch as usual, my nerves jangling. Marlene was already there, her hair loose, her hands wrapped around her mug. I sat down, clutching a book of poems I'd picked up at a used bookstore, but before I could start, she spoke. "Last night," she said, her voice soft but steady, "you read something real. More real than I expected." I swallowed, my mouth dry. "Was it too much?" I asked. She shook her head, her eyes meeting mine. "No, it was exactly what I needed to hear. I stopped painting because someone told me it wasn't enough. But you're drawing something, Josh, a life, a home. Don't stop because you're scared." Her words hit me like a quiet wave, washing away the doubt I'd carried all day. I nodded, unable to look away from her. "I won't," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "But only if you don't stop either." She smiled then, a real smile, small but warm. And for the first time, I felt like we weren't just landlord and tenant, or reader and listener. We were two people seeing each other, really seeing in a way that made the quiet house feel full. I opened the book and started reading, my voice steadier now, and as the words filled the air, I knew something had shifted, not just in me but between us. The nightly readings had become more than a routine. They were a tether pulling me and Marlene closer in ways I hadn't anticipated. Each evening, under the soft glow of the porch lamp, with the rain drumming on the roof and the grapevines swaying in the breeze, I'd read to her poems, scraps of my designs, sometimes just fragments of thoughts I'd jotted down. Her presence, quiet but attentive, made the words feel heavier, like they mattered more than they would have alone. I'd catch her watching me, her brown eyes soft in the lamplight, and every so often she'd smile, a small, private thing that made my chest ache. The house didn't feel like just a place to live anymore. It felt like a space we were building together word by word, night by night. One evening, about 2 months into my stay, a storm rolled in heavier than usual. The power flickered, then died, plunging the house into darkness. I grabbed a flashlight from my room and made my way downstairs, the floorboards creaking under my steps. The kitchen was lit by a single candle on the counter, its flame casting long shadows across the walls. Marlene sat there alone, her hair loose and spilling over her shoulders, a baggy sweater slipping down one arm. She looked smaller than usual, her face half hidden in the dim light, her hands wrapped around a mug like it was the only thing keeping her warm. The air smelled of wax and rain, and the jazz she usually played was silent, replaced by the steady roar of the storm outside. "Power's out," I said, stating the obvious as I set the flashlight on the counter. She nodded, her eyes flicking to me, then back to the candle. "Happens sometimes," she said, her voice low, almost lost in the sound of the rain. "Old house, old wiring." I hesitated, then pulled up a stool and sat across from her, the candlelight flickering between us. I'd planned to read tonight a page from a novel I'd found on her shelf, but the mood felt different, heavier. "No reading tonight?" I asked, trying to keep things light. She shook her head, her lips pressing into a faint smile. "Not yet," she said. "Just sit with me for a minute." We sat in silence, the storm filling the space with its low growl. The candlelight danced across her face, catching the faint lines around her eyes, the curve of her mouth. She looked tired, not just from the day, but from something deeper, something she carried in the quiet moments I'd started to notice. I wanted to ask to reach across the distance, but I didn't know how. Instead, I said, "You okay?" My voice was softer than I meant, like I was afraid of breaking something. She didn't answer right away. Her fingers traced the rim of her mug, slow and deliberate, like she was choosing her words. "Have you ever found a place you're afraid to stay in?" She asked finally, her eyes meeting mine. "Not because it's bad, but because you're scared you'll never want to leave." Her voice was steady, but there was a tremor in it, a vulnerability I hadn't heard before. I swallowed my throat tight. "Yeah," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I think I'm living in that place right now." She looked at me, then really looked, her eyes wide and glassy in the candlelight. For a moment, neither of us moved, the air thick with the weight of what we weren't saying. "I'm scared too," she said, her voice so soft it almost disappeared. "Scared you'll leave like everyone else. Scared this house will go back to being just walls." Her words hit me like a quiet punch, stripping away the distance we'd been dancing around for weeks. I reached out my hand, brushing hers on the counter, and she didn't pull away. Her fingers were warm, trembling slightly, and I curled mine around them, a gentle, tentative hold. "I'm not going anywhere." I said, the words spilling out before I could stop them. "Not yet." Her eyes searched mine, and for a second I thought she might cry. But instead she squeezed my hand so light it was almost nothing but enough to make my heart stutter. "Don't read tonight," she said, her voice barely audible over the rain. "Just stay here." I nodded, my thumb brushing against her knuckles, and we sat there, the candle flickering, the storm raging outside, but the space between us warm, alive, and impossibly close. It wasn't a kiss, wasn't an embrace, but it was something deeper, a moment where we saw each other, not as landlord and tenant, not as two people separated by years or paths, but as two souls caught in the same quiet storm. The candle burned lower, and neither of us moved, like we both knew that letting go would mean letting this moment slip away. The storm passed by morning, leaving the house quiet except for the soft drip of water from the grapevines outside. The power was back, the kitchen now lit by the pale glow of a single bulb, but the air still felt heavy with the weight of what had happened the night before. Marlene's hand in mine, her words about being afraid to stay, the way we'd sat there in the candlelight. It wasn't just a moment. It was a shift, like the house itself had tilted, letting us see each other in a way we couldn't unsee. I went back to my room after, but sleep didn't come. I lay there staring at the ceiling, replaying her voice, her touch, the way her eyes had held mine, like they were asking for something she couldn't say out loud. The days that followed were different, though nothing had changed on the surface. I still read to her each night, poems, sketches, whatever felt real. But now there was a charge in the air, a quiet intensity in the way she listened, the way her gaze lingered when I finished. We didn't talk about that night, didn't name the thing growing between us, but it was there in the way her fingers brushed mine when she handed me tea, in the way I caught her watching me from the garden, her hand still in the soil. The house felt fuller alive, like it was holding its breath alongside us. Then a few weeks later, I got an email that changed everything. A small architecture firm in Portland had seen my portfolio and offered me a junior designer position, steady pay benefits, a real step toward the life I'd been sketching in my head. But it meant moving, leaving Seattle, leaving this house. I sat at my desk staring at the offer, my stomach twisting. Part of me wanted to leap at its stability, a chance to prove myself, but another part, the louder one, kept pulling me back to Marlene, to the porch, to the quiet nights that had started to feel like home. I didn't tell her right away. I kept reading to her each evening, kept showing up, but the decision hung over me like a storm cloud. Finally, the night before I had to give the firm an answer, I couldn't hold it in anymore. We were on the porch, the air cool and damp, the jazz playing low. I'd just finished reading a poem, something about a house with open windows, and set the book down, my hands shaky. "Marlene," I said, my voice rougher than I meant. "I got a job offer in Portland. It's a good one." She didn't look at me right away. Her fingers tightened around her mug, and for a moment she just stared at the grapevines, their leaves dark in the evening light. "Congratulations," she said, finally, her voice steady but quiet, like she was choosing her words carefully. "You deserve it." I swallowed my chest tight. "It means I'd have to move," I said. "Soon." She nodded, still not looking at me. I figured she said, her tone softer now, almost fragile. "Houses like this? They're not meant to keep people forever." The words hit me harder than I expected, like she was letting me go before I'd even decided to leave. I leaned forward, my elbows on my knees, trying to find the right thing to say. "This place," I started, my voice low. "It's more than a house to me. You're more than a landlord. These nights, the readings, you listening, it's made me feel like I'm not just drifting anymore." She turned to me then, her eyes glassy but steady, and for a moment I saw the woman from that stormy night, vulnerable and open. "You did the same for me," she said. "You made this house feel alive again. But Josh, you're young. You've got a life to build. Don't stay here because it's safe." I wanted to argue, to tell her I wasn't staying just because it was safe, but because it was her. But before I could, she stood, her sweater slipping off one shoulder, and went inside. I sat there, the porch suddenly too quiet, the jazz fading into the rain. The next morning I wrote her a letter, my handwriting messy but honest. "Marlene, thank you for letting me hear my own voice. I've never known how to live quietly and still feel so real. Whatever happens this house, you will always be a part of me." I left the letter on the kitchen counter and moved to Portland a week later. The new job was good, busy, challenging everything I'd hoped. But the nights felt empty. No porch, no jazz, no Marlene. I kept her number, but I didn't call, not wanting to disrupt the life she'd built. Then, one rainy afternoon, I went back to Seattle to pick up a box I'd left behind. The house looked the same, the grapevines heavy with water, the porch light glowing. Marlene wasn't there, but on the kitchen table was a new sketch, her house with two windows open, one facing the garden, the other the horizon. Below it, in her neat handwriting, I negotiated the rent. "You still owe me 10 minutes a night." Next time read from my shoulder, not across the table. I stood there holding the sketch, my throat tight. It wasn't a promise, not exactly, but it was an opening, a door left cracked for when I was ready. I folded the sketch carefully, tucked it into my bag, and drove back to Portland, the rain blurring the road ahead. I didn't know if I'd ever read to her again, but I knew I'd carry those nights with me, the sound of her breathing, as I read, the way she'd made me feel seen. For now, that was enough. Bye-bye.